Hello and good morning, and welcome to Australian Seniors Ageing in the Workforce live panel event. My apologies if we're having a bit of a rusty start this morning. It's, I'm sure you've been on Zoom meetings before where this might have occurred. I'm James Valentine. I'm presenter of afternoons on ABC Radio Sydney. I do a jazz program for ABC Radio as well, for ABC Jazz on Sundays. But great to be with you. We've got a terrific morning ahead of us. We've got some great people talking to us, and we're discussing ageism in the workforce. We're discussing working until we're older. We're discussing the changing nature of retirement in Australia. And perhaps we've all been a bit guilty of the ageism in the workforce thing. Have you done the joke where you talk a little bit louder to the older colleague? Have you tried to patiently explain the internet to them, thinking that's really funny? I mean, that's the mild end of things. The more serious end of things is that many older Australians find it hard to stay in the workforce, can find it harder to get re-employed as they age. So that's what we're looking at today. Australian seniors are committed to helping Australians over 50 stay in control of the things that matter most by providing quality products of real value to over 50s and their loved ones. The high quality products, as well as an award-winning customer service team and industry-leading initiatives such as Dare magazine and the Life's Booming podcast, which I'm part of. These have been recognised by both clients and the wider industry, showcasing the commitment to providing Australian seniors with exceptional value and service for the years to come. Take a look at the following video.
With ageism, I did experience it in my previous company, and I knew that I wasn't going to last there beyond 60. Before 60, I got into a company that makes building products, and they're very diversified in employing people. And age is not a barrier if you're able to do the job.
I think it's the assumption that we can't do anything anymore, that we can't contribute, that we're not keeping up with things, particularly technology. That is so untrue of all the senior people I know.
The past 2 years have been defined by uncertainty, and our jobs have become an increasingly important part of our lives, with more of us considering what the future holds, while fewer of us are actually thinking actively about our retirement. Despite the challenges we face in the workforce with age, some of us are grabbing the bull by the horns and reclaiming control over our careers. We're getting together today to discuss the findings from the Ageing in the Workforce 2021 report, exploring current experiences of seniors in the Australian workforce. The Ageing in the Workforce 2021 report forms part of the Australian Seniors series, which explores the subject matters which matter most to our senior community. We surveyed 5,000 Australians over 50, and this in-depth study explores the current experiences of seniors in the Australian workforce, the impact of COVID-19, how they feel about retirement, and how they're taking control over their careers. Wonderful specialists have joined me today to help us understand the state of affairs. You'll meet Ty Rotem. He's a social research expert and consulting partner at My Mavens, a new generation research consulting firm. He's been developing and implementing research for more than 25 years with particular expertise in social trends and consumer behaviour. As the research leader, Ty will guide us through the major findings in ageing in the workforce. We'll be joined by the editor of Dare magazine, a bi-monthly title aimed at Australians over 50s, reaching more than 150,000 Australian seniors customers. Lisa Sinclair is a media professional who's worked across the biggest brands in Australia and London. She's adept at reaching and engaging readers via print and digital. Humphrey Armstrong is a registered organisational psychologist with over 25 years of experience in assisting organisations, teams and individuals plan for managing change. Humphrey's worked with a wide range of organisations within Australia, New Zealand, Pacific and Southeast Asia. He has a special interest in career planning and managing personal change for people considering mid and later life career changes, including transition into retirement. Dr. Marlene Krasovitsky is currently the Campaign Director and Co-Chair of Every Age Counts, a national coalition to end ageism, spearheaded by the Benevolent Society. Prior to joining the Benevolent Society in September 2016, Marlene was the director of Willing to Work, the national inquiry into employment discrimination against older Australians and Australians with a disability with the Australian Human Rights Commission. Did you know 89% of Australians over 50 think ageism is prevalent in society, or 50% say that annoying assumptions are made about them at work? To set up the context, we'd like to start by presenting the main findings of the Ageing in the Workforce 2021 report. Now, if you're watching this, journalists, and you've got questions as we go through, please feel free to deliver them through into the presentation through the Q&A chat function. I'm sure you're familiar with this. It'll be at the bottom of your screen there. Remember, include your full name and your media organisation along with your questions. Ty, if you'd like to take us through the findings, that'd be great. Off you go.
Fantastic. Thanks, James. Okay. So let's get stuck in. So look, I've been proud to be working with Australian seniors since 2015, and we've been exploring important issues and emerging trends amongst senior Australians. And our latest study we're talking about today is focusing on ageing in the workforce. This is our 21st piece of seniors research, and it builds on our previous Seniors in the Workplace study from 2016. So in this phase, we're going to explore the current experiences of Australians in the workforce, the impact of 2020 and COVID-19, how they're taking control of their careers, and how they feel about retirement. So this was a really comprehensive study. We surveyed over 5,000 Australians over the age of 50 years. And these are really robust numbers that are highly representative of our senior population across Australia. And that gives us a lot of confidence in our findings. So with no further ado, let's jump in. So our headline finding is that as many as 9 in 10 seniors believe age discrimination is prevalent in the Australian workplace. We found that as many as 1 in 5 believe they definitely have personally experienced ageism. This climbs to 2 in 3 seniors if we include those who feel they possibly may have experienced ageism personally. I think what's most disturbing about these figures is that when we look back to 2016, these rates have doubled. So it does suggest that ageism is potentially on the rise. We also found that most seniors agree that females tend to be more impacted by ageism in the workplace. Very few felt that males had it tougher than females. And all this is leaving many seniors feeling very patronised at work. We even found that as many as 2 in 5 have not even applied for a job because they felt their age would potentially undermine their chances. We also found that over 1 in 2 working seniors feel undervalued at work, commonly feeling their contributions are not fully recognised and that their skills are being underutilised. Fortunately, it seems that COVID-19 and the events of last year haven't made things any easier for them, and in fact have probably made things a little bit tougher. So over 1 in 2 seniors feel that it has made it harder to get work, and close to 1 in 5 now feel that recent events have impacted their retirement plans. So it's bringing a lot of uncertainty into their working life. In response to this, we can actually see that over 1 in 4 seniors actually admit to trying to make themselves look younger in the workplace or when they're applying for jobs. And that includes things from dyeing their hair, wearing the latest fashion looks, getting the latest haircut and makeup styles. We also found that there's a really strong desire among the working seniors, to keep working longer, with over 3 in 4 wanting to work indefinitely if they're adequately supported to do so. So the vast majority believe that working longer is generally a good thing for Australian seniors. And I think it was quite telling that when we actually just asked the actual retired seniors how they felt about the age when they retired, 2 in 5 wished they'd worked a bit longer, while only just over 5% wished they'd retired earlier. So what are the reasons why seniors want to work past the age of 67? There's a lot of reasons and they're broad ranging. While financials tend to top the list, This was closely followed by other broader wellbeing needs, such as staying engaged, maintaining social connection, and maintaining a sense of purpose. Many seniors, actually, let's go to the next one. Many working seniors are struggling to see themselves fully retiring due to their income needs or the need to stay occupied. And much fewer are actually counting down the days in anticipation to retirement. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty about what they're going to be doing in retirement and how much they're actually looking forward to finishing up with work. Interestingly, we also found that when we focused on retired seniors and we asked them how they felt about re-entering the workforce, as many as 9 in 10 said they would consider re-entering the workforce. And again, that tends to reflect their financial and also broader wellbeing needs. So either being bored with retirement, seeking social connection, or that they miss their job. Unfortunately, however, as many as 4 in 5 lack the confidence about their prospects and potentially see barriers to re-entering the workforce and taking more control. The good news is that in response, 3 in 4 seniors are now planning to take more control of their career. And that's typically looking to reskill, adapt their learning, and grow their value in the workplace. We found that close to 3 in 5 seniors plan to or already have, since turning 50, reskilled or sought further training to improve their prospects. And what's probably most interesting about that is as many as 1 in 2 of those, half of those people who are looking to reskill, have done that in new areas. So they're really expanding their horizons and moving past past roles and that they've been having. What was also interesting is how many of the working seniors actually want to take more control of their retirement transition by getting more support from their employers. So while over 2 in 3 seniors feel discussing retirement plans with their employer is important, only just over 1 in 3 had already done that. These discussions typically include working fewer days, flexible hours, and planning to reduce hours over time as they move into that transition to retirement. Okay, so in summary, we found that a vast majority of senior Australians believe that ageism is prevalent in the workplace these days. We found that females tend to be more impacted than males are. We also found that the events of 2020 and COVID-19 have actually made things a lot tougher for senior working Australians. More than 1 in 4 admit that they make attempts to make themselves actually look younger. So again, making those efforts to adapt and fit into the workplace more. Despite the challenges, many Australians do actually have a strong desire to work longer. And that's because of their enjoyment of work, maintaining a sense of purpose, but also because of financial needs. And we also found that many retirees would consider re-entering the workforce. But again, there's some challenges for them to do that. And they need the support of their employers to be able to manage that transition and to manage that working in later life. Australian seniors are really embracing that need to take more control. And again, we found many are now reskilling, job training, and taking control into their own hands. So that's the end of the research presentation. Just wanted to remind everyone that the full white paper with more extensive findings can be found in that link on the screen there. Thanks very much.
Ty, thank you, and thanks for the excellent work, for the fascinating research there. I mean, I think I'm very struck by the fact that so many people feel they've experienced ageism, but also that so many want to change. You know, we're not talking about the old style retirement. We're talking about people wanting to continue working, wanting to stay engaged. Now, if you've got questions for Ty or any of our other panelists as we go through, deliver your questions through the Q&A function there. There's a chat function Q&A. If you could put your questions into the Q&A function, that'd be great. Include your full name and your media organisation, and then it'd be wonderful. So let's begin some of your discussion here by highlighting that the majority of the seniors, as we just said, feel ageism is prevalent in the workplace, although the vast majority of Australians over 50s feel that working longer will be good for them, will be good for everyone. They have a strong desire to enter the workforce from retirement. How are we going to manage all these things? There's a conflict there, isn't there? Marlene is Campaign Director and Co-Chair Director of Every Age Counts. So could you please help us understand, but firstly, what are the benefits of working longer, Marlene?
Thank you, James. Yes, certainly ageism is pervasive and highly tolerated. It is in our language, our relationships, our systems, and many of us have also internalised it. But the workplace is often where people experience or witness ageism the most, or for the first time. Perhaps they've never defined themselves by their age, but others begin to. And we can see ageism in recruitment, retention, access to training and promotion, and even exit from the workforce. And study after study confirms this. But work has many social and personal benefits: dignity, independence, the sense of purpose, contribution, and social connectedness, all good things. And the right to work is also a fundamental human right, and it is not one which diminishes with age. The reality is also that most of us are living longer, healthier lives, and our expectations of this part of our life are changing. And there's also other recent research that tells us that 25% of those who are over 65 who are still working don't think they'll ever retire. Also, many of us not only want to, but need to work longer. We are partnering or repartnering later in life, buying homes later, starting families later, continuing our education and changing career paths all through our lives. So continuing to work is an important part of that equation, and of course for our financial security.
Humphrey Armstrong, let me bring you in here from your perspective as an organisational psychologist and as an executive coach. What are the benefits of working longer?
Thanks, James, and I'll follow on from what Marlene has said. I think that from a psychological perspective that we all seek to satisfy a set of common needs. Firstly, as Ty has talked about, we need to have enough income to have a roof over our heads and some food on the table. But despite however old we are, I think we also need someone and something to love and care for. We need something meaningful to do, and we also need something to look forward to. Now, the something to love and care for can in fact be an animal. And it's amazing as I walk around our local community, how many dogs of varying sizes are on leads. And something to look forward to. It's fascinating, I think, that if we work, we can look forward to the weekend. We can look forward to a holiday. So the good news is that good jobs that align with the skills, interests, and capabilities of over 50-year-olds seek to satisfy all of those core needs. So this is very much echoed in the survey. 88% who said they wanted to continue and re-enter the workforce. Almost half said they did for financial reasons, which Ty talked about. 1 in 5 missed that purpose and that sense of interest and meaning from their jobs and their industries. Interestingly, 1 in 4 were bored. In fact, have been bored with the lockdowns that we've endured over these last couple of years. And I guess almost 1 in 5 have been really seeking social connection. And I think the fascinating thing about that is that for some people, especially who live on their own, their work families are in fact some of the closest relationships they have. And so it's really important that, of course, if we retire and we lose those work families, we then start to struggle. In contrast, I think some of the survey results illustrate very clearly that persistent experience of ageism, being undervalued, under-recognized, being dismissed, really tends to really erode our sense of self-esteem, our sense of who we are, and our confidence. So generally, I think, as Marlene was saying too, that having a job means that we're more productive, less socially isolated, live healthier and generally happier lives.
This is the nub of it, though, isn't it, Humphrey? There's this clash. You've got these, clear benefits that you and Marlene have expressed there. You've got a clear desire on the part of older Australians to continue working, yet they confront widespread, growing ageism in the workplace. How are we going to get business and society overall, perhaps, to conquer this discrimination?
Well, I think there are a number of, commonly held stereotypes which actually block 50-year-olds going into work or retaining jobs. Older people are often considered to cost more, are afraid of technology, are slow to learn and harder to train, perhaps lack motivation and especially stamina, are resistant to change, and in fact, there's a sense that they get sick more often. Now, in fact, all of those have been found to really not to be true. And just to take three of them, afraid of technology, I've been staggered how many older people have grabbed hold of video technology and run with it creatively. And as over 50s, we may need some help in getting connected and keeping connected, but the survey results very clearly show that over 50-year-olds are willing and happy to have a go, to learn new technologies. Slower to learn and difficult to train. Well, again, the survey results say that that is not the case. And I think one of the fascinating things here is that emotional intelligence, our emotional capabilities, actually increase with age, well into the 70s. And resistance to change, well, I think older people who know why change is needed and how to change are prepared to jump on board. In fact, it's fascinating that twice as many startups are initiated by over 50-year-olds than 20-year-olds. So as a community, how, and as organizations, what can we do to try and solve these blockages? Now, I think, first of all, we need to build diversity into our diversity and inclusion programs. Now, we hear a lot about gender diversity, especially over the last few months. But in fact, the interesting thing is that age diversity is often ignored, and we've got to actually bring that in and really reinforce that. Research studies also show that diversity is an incredible advantage in organizational life. It increases profitability, increases creativity, enhances governance, and it also enables better problem solving. So, as mentioned, as emotional intelligence can increase with age, there's this huge resource where older people are in fact very valuable and very skilled at often handling interpersonal problems, really tricky interpersonal problems. And generally they are better able to cope with ambiguity and they tolerate paradox. So it's important for organizations to realize that older people, in fact, have that ability to know when to jump in and when to not jump in. And being older doesn't necessarily mean wiser, but being older perhaps improves our chances of being wiser. And wisdom, I believe, is a very important commodity in this very changing world of ours right now.
Yeah, some very nice points there, Humphrey. Lisa, do you want to add to that? You're editor of Dare magazine. What do you see? What do you read about? What can you tell us about how we can, confront this discrimination, this constant sort of ageism that so many will face?
Yeah, thanks, James. Look, I'd really like to see companies being much more progressive about this issue. I think they could introduce things like menopause policies, which would be so useful for women over 45. I think they really need to acknowledge the pressures on the sandwich generation As Marlene said, they might have children at home still. They might be trying to help grown-up children, help out with grandchildren, and more they're looking after elderly parents. And that's going to become a bigger issue in the years to come. So there has to be a degree of flexibility and acknowledgement of the pressures on this cohort. I would love it if companies in general stopped advertising for unicorns, which are these mythical creatures that have 15 different boxes that you've got to tick. I mean, that's hard enough for any age, but I think it could be particularly confronting for the over 50s when you might be put off for applying for a job just because there's one element that you don't actually meet. And when you are applying for those jobs, it'd be great if they valued experience. When my role was made redundant a few years ago and I had to sort of rebrand, I was so shocked to discover that my CV should only include the previous 10 years of employment, because I felt like, what about all the experience and all the knowledge I'd gained before that? But that's what they tell you to do. 10 years, the past 10 years is all that's relevant when you're applying for jobs. In terms of salaries, I think that companies could be a bit more realistic. It is said that we should maybe reduce our salaries as we get older for various reasons. I think that companies could look at a senior member of the workforce and say, well, you know what, 3 days of them is actually worth 5 days of someone much more junior with less skills. And those industries, you know, we've all had to pivot in the last few years, but there's been businesses and industries that I work in the media, so I know what I'm talking about, that's really had to change and adapt. But they need to make sure that their staff are being upskilled all the time and giving the training to adapt as well and to make them and keep them relevant in the workforce. We had a great story in the magazine about a man, and he was a TV repairman. So, you know, he was going out of business. Who repairs their TVs anymore? You just throw it out and get a new one. So a local company, an electrical company, saw that he had transferable skills and gave him part-time work. Meanwhile, he went to TAFE to get the qualifications to be a commercial skipper, and he now runs whale charters in Port Stephens. So what a life. And one of the things I'm really keen on is reverse mentoring. I think this is a really valuable tool in a workplace. You know, I've mentored people over the years. I've had my own mentors. But reverse mentoring is when the younger people mentor the older people, and it's really useful for things like technology. It's really useful for workplace culture and how that evolves. So I think that's something that a lot of companies could look at bringing in, would be really useful.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa. Fantastic. One of the other most significant changes in our lives recently is we've lost this sort of sense of the right time to retire. What we've been hearing through this presentation, through this research, is that most people over 50s wish they'd worked longer. Very few wish that they'd retired earlier. And most would want to work indefinitely, keep on going, if well supported, if there was flexibility in the workplace and the like. Many now struggle to imagine retiring, with very few actually having really solid plans about when we should actually do this. And what happens to most is they kind of slip in to retirement rather than really being active about it. Marlene, could you comment on this? Do you think, you know, let's look at just the money. Do you think Australian seniors can afford to retire at 67 anymore based on the current cost of living?
I think it's different for everyone, and I don't think there's one size fits all here. But the research does tell us that there are many people who are worried about paying the bills, and many who feel very insecure financially and in other ways about moving into this phase of life. Chances are, if you're a single woman who doesn't own her own home, it's going to be tough to live on the age pension age. However, for other people, the age of 67 seems like a wonderful green light that they're moving towards, and pushing the retirement age back and back and back hurts for those people. But also the reality is that many who lose their jobs in their 50s or so simply just cannot get back into the workforce and may find themselves on job seeker, sometimes until they reach that age pension eligibility age, 67 or wherever it sits at that time. Now, that can be a lot of years, and whatever savings you may have may be run down by then. And the reality is that the typical job seeker recipient today is now an older woman, not a younger man, which was traditionally the case. Now, regarding your point, James, about slipping into retirement, generally, this is not a phase of our life that many of us have really planned for. It just kind of happens. And sometimes it happens involuntarily, as I've just said. However, it's always good to think about this part of our lives and to make a plan about what works for you. So to try to be in control. And it's terrific to see in the research that older people are trying to do just that.
Yeah, terrific. Ty, let's go to the research. What does that tell us about the affordability of retirement for Australians, particularly around that retirement age of 67?
Yeah, look, I agree with all the things that Marlene was saying. To build on that, I mean, I think the reality is most seniors are not confident the age pension is necessarily going to support the life that they aspire to. And look, it's a real challenge for those in the current generation who are retired and transitioning to retirement, because they may not have the benefit of compulsory super throughout their working life. We're also seeing the big catch-up challenges for females to close that superannuation gap because of career punctuation and pay gap differentials. So again, there are some people who are potentially really struggling to be able to afford to retire. But I think one of the more important things is that rather than some standard amount of money that everybody needs to be able to afford to retire, it's really being able to afford the retirement that you aspire to and the kind of life that you want to be living. And I think that's very different for everybody. The issue probably is, though, that many pre-retirees, before they get into retirement, lack certainty about living costs, about what their needs will be in retirement. They're not quite sure how they'll be spending their time. So there's a lot of apprehension there. There can be a lot of tension about that sort of anticipation of that uncertainty. What we do tend to find, though, is once people actually move into retirement, they get comfortable and they regain that sort of sense of control as they sort of move forward. But again, there's a lot of things that can be done to help pre-retirees actually feel a lot more confident about the retirement that's ahead of them.
We've mentioned the effect of COVID-19 and suggested that this has created a lot of difficulties in the labour market in all sorts of ways. But there's probably also opportunities there for over 50s and companies when they're seeking out new talent. Humphrey, does this change the future of retirement for Australians over 50s? What can we read there?
Well, I'm very positive about the future, and so let's explore for a moment where are some of the opportunities. We used to get educated over a period, primary, secondary, perhaps tertiary. Then we had a long period of working, and then we'd retire 60, 65, and that has been totally replaced by a non-linear, multi-phase sort of process now, where there's lots of us, in fact, have a little bit of education. We try out a few jobs. We then, in fact, start seriously building up and perhaps working up the ladder a little bit, getting training, changing roles, having a break to have children, look after grandchildren. So it's much more fluid. The sort of work process and the work, the models, patterns have absolutely changed. I think for organizations too, one of the interesting things here is that many organizations are growing laterally, horizontally, rather than vertically. And this horizontal move creates a whole lot of integration jobs, which are absolutely ideal for over 50s because they've got experience, they know the organizations, and they've got those interpersonal skills that help bridge some of the boundaries between these various partnerships and joint ventures. Now, the other interesting thing, I think, is that at the end of all this comes this phase of pre-retirement. It's not retirement. It's a time, in fact, when many seniors, in fact, choose to take on encore careers. And I think we're going to hear more about this notion of encore careers. I have a colleague who's in her mid-50s who's just completed a nursing qualification and is now an ICU COVID specialist nurse, and it's stressful, but she's loving it. She said it's giving her the greatest meaning she's had for many years. Now, others of us don't actually leap into a totally new career, but we build a portfolio of part-time or paid and unpaid activities. So it's a portfolio of activities that runs us forward. And underpinning all of this is the psychological concept of mastery. And mastery is really having an internal locus of control. It's sort of saying, I can do. And it's an ability to really step out and be more proactive and creative. And in fact, I think it's fascinating that some baby boomers are now becoming the change agents of aging, as in fact they were the change agents in their youth. And so my view is, let's have a go. It's never too late to have a go. And it reminds me of Emily Kumware, the Aboriginal painter who didn't start painting until she was in her late 70s. And then when she was 84, she painted a painting called Earth's Creation, which sold recently for $2.1 million, setting a record not only for women artists in Australia, but also for Aboriginal artists. So my sense is we need to actually be proactive and get out and have a go. And that's what the survey is telling us as well. People, older people are prepared to have a go and adapt.
Thanks, Humphrey. I'm going to go and get the oils. That sounds very promising. Thanks for that one. Marlene, you know, it strikes me as we listen to this discussion, like how we're stuck in this old-fashioned notion of retirement. You know, you'll get 65, you get the gold watch, and then you'll get a boat. You know, like we can't seem to shake this notion that somehow it's all going to stop. That is not the future of retirement in Australia, is it? Do you want to expand on that?
Sure. Again, I think there's no one size fits all here, and I think it probably looks different for everybody. But I do want to reinforce Humphrey's point that that old notion of this linear trajectory in our life of school, work, retirement, or in other terms, growth, consolidation, and some notion of leisure, is being considerably disrupted. What it means to be a certain age is changing. And another point I just want to bring up is that we all age in a cultural context, and our choices and our priorities will be informed by our cultural expectations and our values. And in our hugely rich and diverse community, you don't have to look far to see people doing this phase of life in all sorts of different ways. But coming back to COVID just for a moment, for some, COVID has presented opportunities, but not for everybody. There is this growing mismatch between employers who are desperate for workers and workers who either don't have the qualifications or training, can't travel to where the work is, or have other barriers to being able to take up the opportunities that are presented. But what is certain now is that flexibility is now part of the employment landscape in a way that it's never been before. And that does present enormous opportunities, because we know that flexibility is good for business and good for workers. So I think we're on the cusp of imagining and reimagining this phase of our lives, as the research indicates. Many of us want to contribute, stay connected, live a life of purpose and meaning. So we're inventing ways to make that happen. Now, it could involve portfolio work, reduced hours, compressed hours, learning new skills, trades, exploring new career paths. And what's also interesting is that employers are seeing the benefits of more age-inclusive workplace cultures and multi-generational workforces. And the more companies that are open to these new ways of working, the better we can harness the skills and experience, but also expectations of older people.
Lisa, let's think about this. I mean, we've been talking about this, I think, in a sort of broad sense, what culture needs to do, what companies need to do, how we need to change. But, you know, let's bring it down to individuals. If individuals want to stay working, if they want to stay engaged with the workforce. Lisa, what tips would you give Australian seniors, older Australians, when they're applying for a job and they want to keep employed?
Yeah, look, I mean, Ty's already mentioned that the research showed 50%, almost 50% were looking at getting younger clothes, dyeing their hair. I think 12% were considering surgery, which is fine, you know, you do you. But I think there's other things that people can do. LinkedIn is an incredibly powerful tool if you use it properly. So, you know, you should be updating your LinkedIn profile or creating one if you don't have one. Make sure you get some really good advice about how to use it, best practice, because it can also be quite an unhelpful tool as well. I would say this, I say read. There's been an explosion in careers journalism in recent years, and workplace and culture, and there's some really great content being created. There's an amazing blog called Ask a Manager, which offers incredible advice about workplace culture, but also cover letters and CVs. The BBC Online does really good workplace journalism as well, the Harvard Business Review. There's a Dare magazine. We do a lot of careers advice as well, so I would say that. And the other thing is, I really think you have to be proactive. The Australian Human Rights Commission has this amazing resource. It's the Older Workers Resource Hub, and that's got a lot of information, and it's got really good online courses for employees and employers, and I would urge everyone to have a look at that and to do the courses. For the employers, could there be a lot of bias you didn't realise that you were possibly tapping into? And for the employees, it's a great confidence boost actually, because it just keeps reinforcing all the messaging that we've talked about today about how valuable older workers are in the workforce.
Ty, from the research that you did to prepare the report, what are your thoughts on what the future of retirement's going to look like?
Look, I think the research is suggesting that this desire to work longer, that this desire to sort of manage more of a transition means that we're going to see more extended transitions into retirement rather than the hard retirement event that we sort of traditionally know and associate with retirement. So I think that has a lot of benefits for the individual, but I think that's also going to have a lot of benefits for the workplace in terms of sort of increased efficiencies that they're going to be able to utilize, but also productivity gains for society in general through being able to extend the working life of more experienced workers. And I think there's a brilliant example of that recently, where we're seeing thousands of doctors, nurses, psychologists, and dentists being brought back in for retirement to help out with the workload that COVID is creating. So again, I think we're going to see a lot more of that and a lot more benefits across the board from seniors working longer. I think something else that comes out of that is the need for better retirement planning. I think a lot of people are slipping into retirement. Those who are planning for retirement are often just focusing on the financial side of things. And I think that this research is telling us that it's more than just financials are important, but it's more than just financials. And we also need to plan for social connection, plan for purpose, plan for how we'll actually be spending our time in retirement, and make sure we have something to look forward to.
Ty, fantastic. Thanks so much for that. Humphrey, Marlene, Lisa, like really great presentation there. Some really things to engage, a lot of really great things to engage with there. If you've got questions coming out of all this, whack them in the Q&A there, put your name, your media organisation in there. We've got 10, 15 minutes now to get these questions through to the panel. So don't hesitate, get them in there. We'd love to address whatever it is you've been.
Let me know when you want that slide to clear.
So let me just have a little look at some of what's come in already. Marlene, we might start with you. Do you think that employers are aware of ageism? Do they know it's going on? Is it something they wouldn't even, is it on the minds of many employers in Australia?
I think it is on the minds and on the radars of some employers, but certainly not as many as we would hope. And just coming back to the point that Humphrey raised, many employers have excellent diversity and inclusion strategies, and they do this stuff really, really well. But age is not a criterion for diversity for them. And so therefore the ageism and age as a subject, if you like, is invisible. And so they don't look at the research in terms of recruitment or their performance in terms of recruitment data. They don't look at their retention. They don't look at it through an age lens. So therefore it's very difficult to see ageism at play. They may not ask about those questions in their workplace culture surveys and those kinds of things. So that's a very easy way, if you like, to start to put that on an organisation's radar. Companies have come so far in recent years around diversity and inclusion, whether it's gender or LGBTI issues or race, ethnicity, and so on. And so they do this really, really well. So if they can apply that to age, I think we will come a long, long way.
Yeah. Humphrey, what are some of the opportunities here, do you think, associated with employing mature workers for business. You talked about some of these. Just expand on that a little. What's, you know, it tends to be seen as negative, isn't it? You're going to have to keep these old people around or something, or they've passed their use-by date or something. The young people will bring all this energy and a new insight into the whole place. We don't look at it in terms of what the opportunities are for a business if they keep employees, keep older employees or employ new ones.
Well, James, I think it comes back to there's a real sense that I think older people have more experience and are able to actually deal with these interpersonal issues and conflict and ambiguity, and as I said before, dealing with tolerance of paradox, where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So I guess wisdom, that aging, allows older people to be, I think, a huge resource in actually managing the interfaces between the organisation and the public. I understand quite a lot of older people have been employed in tracing, in COVID tracing. There are lots of jobs where they can actually empathise, understand with what people are saying, and I guess they've learnt that over time. So I think that ability to actually manage the interfaces in organisations is a huge opportunity, as well as the opportunity to design and find your own little niches in this world. It's amazing when you really talk to some older people, the things they're doing, some of which are paid. They've found little niches to actually make a contribution to their community. So there are one or two ideas there.
Yeah. Marlene, is there something of a clash here? You know, you've been talking about we need to include age diversity along with LGBTQI diversity or disability diversity and this kind of thing. So I'm sort of seeing, if I was a young worker in a place, I often want that older person to move on. Now, let me have my opportunity. Let me have my shot. You know, don't keep these older people hanging around, this sort of stuff. They're standing in my way, you know, like, is this a clash between, for a workplace where they need to fulfill the diversity requirements, they've got younger workers who want to get on and get going, and now we're saying you've got to keep these older workers around as well?
It's often portrayed that way. I don't buy it. I think this is not a zero-sum game. This is not a me versus you or an us versus them. I think that is both divisive and unhelpful in a workplace culture. The reality is, particularly now that flexibility is so much a part of our workplaces and our expectations, that opens up a whole new bunch of ways of working and of providing the services or functions or whatever it is that a workplace does. So if we can start to open up that thinking away from the one full-time worker and the one full-time worker to the actual functions that are required and the skills that are required, we'll see all sorts of configurations emerging. And we also know that mentoring, as Lisa was saying, reverse mentoring, we have to say reverse mentoring because mentoring always, traditionally means old to young. But we do have such enormous amounts to learn from each other. And we also know that people like to teach and like to learn. So multi-generational workforces are also really good for business. It's really interesting to see, there's a lot of research that says that younger people in the workforce are looking up and seeing how their older workers are being treated and not feeling too good about it, because we're all getting older. We can all see ourselves in this.
Yeah. Question coming in from Jennifer Merrigan. She's editor of Have a Go News. This is for you, Lisa. One of the things I noticed, this is Jennifer saying this, is that ageism is prevalent in mainstream media. And the survey shows that ageism seems to be more prevalent over the last 4 years. How can we stop mainstream media to stop being so ageist? Is this an influence on workers? If the media is doing it, if they've, perpetuating all these stereotypes, well, it's going to be hard to think, get workplaces to think differently, isn't it?
Look, I would actually disagree that it's necessarily mainstream media. I think this might get me in trouble. I think it's advertisers are a huge problem. And I have found that in my work very much about the way that people are portrayed through advertising. I think the media's got hugely better probably in the last 5 years at representing a more diverse community, and that includes older people and how they are represented. But certainly in terms of, if you think about you know, even clothing ads, the amount of times I've gone to companies and said, have you shot this on an older person? Because I know they're directing their business towards older people, but they still put the clothes on younger people. I think the media still has a way to go. I think magazines like Dare are really helping with that. But I think they have got better, and they are much more aware of representing older people in the right way in the workplace, in the media.
In the media, yeah. I mean, I could comment that, you know, from working in daily radio on ABC radio, that we constantly have to remind ourselves that somebody who's aged 60 or 70 was born in 1960, 1950, not 1920. You know,
yeah,
they're not a silly-haired granny making tea. You know, they were likely,
yes.
they were just as likely to be stoned at a music festival in their
exactly.
youth. You know,
and I think it's worth remembering.
They weren't in World War II. You know, like you have to sort of update your notion of what a 60 or 70-year-old is.
Indeed.
That's right. And with Gen X as well. I mean, you know, the older Gen X's are now, you know, approaching their 60s. So there will be a real, that shift will continue, and it will get faster, I think, in terms of representation.
The shock among the 50-year-olds at work that Nirvana's Nevermind was 30 years old was, you know, they all had to have a lie down. It was, you know.
Yeah.
For Lisa as well, how can businesses change their, I'm just reading this as D+I policies to address ageism? I'm not quite sure what that is, but do you understand, is that diversity and inclusion policies to address ageism, Lisa?
Sorry, James, could you say that again? I just didn't catch that.
How can businesses change their diversity and inclusion policies to address ageism?
Well, I mean, it starts at the top. It starts with the executive. It starts with people and culture. And that's where it begins. But also, I think people themselves can take a bit of power into their own hands and start asking for it, and then collaborate on these policies. And hopefully the end result will be something much more significant. But it amazes me how many people over 50 aren't aware of the ageism in their own organisations and aren't doing anything to address it. So I think it needs to be a 2- or 3-pronged approach.
Yeah, Marlene, you got some views on this?
I think Lisa's exactly right. There's no silver bullet here. There's no just do one thing. This does require a multi-pronged approach. And the more collaborative and inclusive it can be in terms of the development of the priorities, the better it is. But it always has to start with some data. Look at your recruitment stats, look at your workforce projections, look at all of those things, so that whatever gets included into that strategy is good for your business.
Humphrey, do you feel like you're talking to organisations, when you're talking to organisations, you know, across the world, do you feel like they're getting this, they want to get this?
I guess as we've been saying, all of us have been saying, that I think it's very patchy. We've also got to take into account different cultures, because retirement is a very Western invention. In many other cultures, people go on working, and in fact, I think as Marlene almost suggested here, we've got models in different cultures of how older people, their skills and their abilities are utilised right through until they pretty well die. And it's really fascinating. I think the other thing that's interesting is that midlife now runs from 43 to 62. And so that whole concept that, you know, as you transition through the 50s and into the early 60s, you're still really just in midlife. We're all living longer. And in fact, many of us will be living well past 100 as the years progress. The number of centenarians are going up considerably. There used to be one person, I understand, in the Buckingham Palace sort of writing the letters for the Queen. Now I understand there are 7.
Yeah, well, the Queen's not far off writing a letter to herself. It's yeah. I mean, this is a fascinating thing. That, you know, we could do another whole panel on the change, how lifespan, our increasing lifespan is going to change all of our stages of life. You know, back to childhood and so on. But absolutely, there's another day. Thanks so much. I think this has been a really engaging discussion. I've really enjoyed being part of it. Humphrey Armstrong, Marlene Krasvitsky, Ty, and Lisa Sinclair. Thank you so much for being part of it today. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. The video will be available. The white paper, as Ty said, is also available, so you'll be able to find those links if you want to follow up on what's going on. It has been a really, really great discussion, and I hope you've got everything, got a lot of good stuff out of it. Aging in the Workforce 2021 is the name of the research findings if you're looking for it, and so you'll be able to find that. Thanks for joining us. Remember to visit the link on the screen if you're looking for more information on all of that research. It should be up there right now, so copy that down and have a look. Farewell, everyone. Thanks everybody for your participation and contributions. See you again.
Thanks, James.